It's quite a tough job you have, trying to give morals and ethics to a country that doesn't seem to have any anymore. Our cricket certainly doesn't have any morals and ethics. And I think what we need to ask ourselves is do we want our profession to fall to the kind of standards that cricket has fallen to in this country? Where and how did it fall to that standard? I think because people were there's a term that I've just learned from a Disney movie, and the reason that we fell to that standard is when you're talking about morals and ethics, it's quite it's a subject that nobody wants to talk about because first of all, these are such personal things. And sometimes I feel that these are also things which have to do with the society that you live in. So maybe in the 1950s you were allowed to advertise cigarettes, for instance. And I remember seeing an ad in a Bill Ryson book which said cigarettes, more doctors recommend Camel cigarettes than other cigarettes. And maybe, we need to be, and so why did we do that in the 1950s? Because we felt that it was fine. And we need people to tell us at times, and society and the people who are within the profession tell us what is actually right and what is wrong, because I think there has to be an awareness. And that awareness makes you ask, are you doing the right thing? Is because a lot of us don't really look at social responsibility, because we were never aware that we had a social responsibility. As a result of which, our roads are the way they are. I think right now India is like at the peak of this social responsibility awareness. So I think sometimes what happens is that in advertising because we are in the business of trying to out-compete the competition, we think by any means necessary. But what is by any means necessary? And sometimes I think you need to lower it down to your own personal means. Now, if you're doing a job in an agency or at the client's end, somebody else has told you to do this. Now, how do you have the sort of auqad to go out there and tell them, sorry, this is wrong? I mean, who are you? You're just somebody who has to do a job. And perhaps it is through this method of awareness that you could even get protected from doing something that you perhaps sometimes don't want to do yourself. Because, to my mind, the lowest common denominator, the way that you can think about something that is right or wrong, is if you're doing it to somebody else, what if somebody did this to you? If somebody did this to you, is it okay? Supposing tomorrow you find that you are in a position where you have to give an ad that basically speaks about the competition in a certain manner, and you think it's great fun because you're doing it in a light kind of manner, and what's the big deal? It's just a joke. And so what? We're not really lying, but people understand it's not a lie, it's a spoof. And so there are ways in which we sort of cheat ourselves to say these things. And I think what you need to ask yourself is, if you are at the receiving end of that, is that okay or not? Obviously, if you're at the sending end of it, it's great fun. But sometimes being at the receiving end of even humor is, how shall I say, all humor in some ways is arrogance. And so you need to ask yourself whether it's okay for you to be at the receiving end of what you're sending out. A lot of the time, we ourselves don't know, should we be portraying women in a certain kind of manner? Should we be portraying children in a certain kind of manner? And it's only through conversations like this that we'll begin to understand whether we should not, what are the social kind of cliches that we are propagating within this society, because more and more advertising is affecting society. I think there is a word that we all have which is in our DNA, and it's called jugaad. And for us, this word is something that society has forced us to do, our country has forced us to do. And jugaad by necessarily means that you are doing something like negative, or you're lying, or you're trying to sort of twist the system. And I have a feeling that we need to change that word and say there is negative jugaad and there is positive jugaad. And negative jugaad is when we begin to really look at when we're doing things which are wrong and we know it's wrong. sometimes we know it's wrong before society knows it's wrong. And before society tells us it's wrong, we know in our hearts it's wrong, but because society is allowing it, you say, chalo, chalo, sab koi kar rahe, to humko bhi karna chahiye. So I have a feeling that we need to now say, okay, we have to do jugaad because that's the way that the world, India certainly has forced us to behave. But we need to turn around and say, is this like sort of good jugaad or is this bad jugaad in terms of just morals and ethics and values? Enough lecture baji on morals, ethics and values. In any case, I was meant to speak about competition. That was really my subject. Really, I think I'll spend 2 more minutes on competition, and that's got to do sometimes to do, and I'm happy that ASCI's got laws and rules, because every profession and every game should have laws and rules. You don't want to be playing boxing and discover that the other guy is actually kicking you, because that's against the laws of boxing. So why should somebody, boxing needs rules, and therefore so does advertising. If we don't put our own rules, then the great fear is that the government will put rules on us. And by that time, you'll then have to get a censor certificate for every ad. And then we don't know what kind of paranoias will be running around in the government at that time, So I think the time has come for us to ask ourselves and to know whether, and to question. I don't take on certain kinds of ads because I don't do those certain kind of ads. And there are certain kinds of ads that other people think it's okay to do. I think that rather than it becoming just a personal moral kind of thing, it needs to be a conversation that therefore becomes part of our own profession, or part of our conversation within friends, in agencies, and amongst filmmakers. There was, I think, the word really, which is an old-fashioned word, which is, it's not cricket. And I think a lot of the time what happens is that we're doing stuff which is not cricket. And the reason that we're doing stuff that is not cricket is because we're not even aware that it's not cricket. And I think it's great now that we are spreading some awareness on what is, when you're competing, what is the right way to compete, what is and when you're giving facts about competition, are these facts or are these things? Because I'm with agencies and clients a lot of the time where we put out an ad. I don't do them, but I've heard conversations like that. Says, what's the problem? By the time the ad is really, it'll get released, ASCI will come on board, then they'll say remove the ad, but it's fine, no, what's the hassle? Because people have already seen it. So they will say, sorry, we didn't realize, now we'll remove the ad. So that kind of conversation I find untakeable, completely untakeable, because it really means that is jugaad at its most Indian negative kind of manner. I think what we really need to ask ourselves is, do we want our profession to fall to the depths that cricket has fallen or had fallen? And we better stop ourselves before we get there, because it's not everything is fair in competition. That's not the way it should be. I won't speak further on morals, ethics, and competition. I think these are questions that you need to ask yourself when you're making your own films, and that film has to count, because in some ways, what you're doing with that film is you're changing an attitude, and you're using cinema at its most social, activist, fanatical, fundamentalist kind of manner. Because what you're doing is you're making public service work, in a way. And you have to have a responsibility, because films can change society and can give you the awareness to change society. And if we had not known domestic violence, and this is the problems of domestic violence, or if we had not known let's say the problems of polio, or we had not known that it's okay, how to deal with people with AIDS, then there would not be that awareness in society. And I think that you need to take the subject matter that you have as seriously as that, because it is an illness, and it is an illness that we need to actually be made aware about, and then we need to say, oh shit, we should not do this. Oh. So in doing that, of course, your big problem is that you'll be preaching. And I think that is something which you'll know that you should not do, because you're young, and therefore you're not preachers, and so hopefully you'll not use cinema as a platform to preach. I think there are 3 or 4 questions that you need to ask yourself. The first question you need to ask yourself is, what am I saying? And I think that you're very clear about this is what I'm saying. And I think the second question you need to ask yourself is, how am I saying it? and not the technology, but whatever story that you have. And I think who you're saying it to is very clear also. So these are the three questions. But to my mind, I find that a lot of that thinking is done by a lot of people, which is what am I saying, how am I saying it, who am I saying it to. But there is a fourth, and this is how I have lived my life in the last 3 or 4 years, by asking myself this one key question. And no matter what you're doing, I think this is the question that you really need to ask yourself. It's not the what am I saying, and of course it is. It is the what am I saying and the how am I saying and who am I saying it to. But I think the key thing that you need to ask yourself is, what should the viewer feel? And as soon as you begin to take it out of you, saying this is what I want to say, to this is what I want that viewer to feel, you'll suddenly discover that you're thinking about the whole thing in a very different way. I took a course, I was a student in a course at the Bombay University last year. I couldn't finish it because it was on Sunday mornings from 9 a.m. To 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And it was a course on Indian aesthetics. And the reason I took the course on Indian aesthetics is because of the rasa system. And the rasa theory is something which we all need to fundamentally be aware about, because it talks about not the emotion that the actor feels or the communicator feels, but the emotion that the viewer or the audience feels. And you need to, I think, you need to articulate that. It's very difficult to articulate. You need to say, and that comes to sur, that comes to tone, that comes to pitching. And once you begin to actually start having conversations about that, that's the greatest reason to make cinema, which is that you want to move somebody else, or you want your idea to have some effect in somebody else's heart, or even in his mind, and sometimes in his eyes, or maybe even lower. Well, don't make those ads which are the Dio kind of ads, because those only aim for lower. But communication, what is a message? A message is not, what is communication? It's not message sent, it's message received. And you may be sending lots of messages in the work that you're going to be now doing, but I think what you need to be asking yourself is, it's not the message that I send, but it's the message that you receive. And we're hoping that you will not receive that message in a way in which you just understand and say, yeah, I got the idea, but in a way in which it actually genuinely moves you. Because the only thing that will change society is emotion. And intellectual stuff is not going to change society. That's about all that I have to say. Basically say that I'm looking forward to seeing some of these films. And I'm hoping that I will see many more good films than I expect to see. Because sometimes I feel that people don't put in that kind of effort or that kind of thought. Do it for fun, but guys, remember that you need to basically make even the jury sit up. I think that is a key. Your first audience is going to be us. So go out there and grab us.